To draw the roadmap to decriminalization in Kenya, I would imagine that we want to appreciate how we came to be where we are as a country. In the 17th century, 18th century, history records of a continent that was, I'm very, very specific on the centuries, 16th, 17th century there. History records of a continent that was not necessarily homophobic. It speaks about the Dagara from Burkina Faso who believed that homosexuals in their society were gatekeepers. It speaks about the Mugawe of the Merus, whose Mugawes were traditional medicine men who were respected and held in high esteem. The Mugawes were homosexuals. It speaks about the Oneki of the Kikuyus, the Zande, and the Shonas of the Zimbabwe, who are leaders in their own right, in their own communities, and who had special powers in terms of their role in society, in spirituality. And what happened is that with the advent of Christianity, the missionaries came and to impose their power, because the theology they had was very, very closely linked to Victorian legislation, to impose these powers upon the natives, as they called them. Whatever religious structures, whatever power hierarchies they had that were existing, especially in the spiritual realm, as natives, they had to be destroyed and demonized. And we see this very well, especially the classical story of the Ugandan martyrs, where the Kabaka Mwanga was accused of sodomizing the boys who were serving in his court. And it's always the victor, the Church of England missionaries who wrote their story in their own narrative, because when you date back to all the letters, the correspondences that they were writing back to England, there are a lot of evidence of the assumption they had of the heteronormativity of the black person or the native Africans. They believed that sex was only used for reproduction and not for pleasure. They believed that the African was not imaginative enough to do anything in terms of the sexual expression. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in 1897, Kenya adopted the Indian Penal Code, which was a piece of legislation from the Commonwealth, copy-pasting from Victorian England. And part of the provisions of this penal code contain what we call sodomy laws, but it also contains a lot of unjust laws, such as if you're arrested, if a police officer stops you when you're loitering in town and you don't have 40 shillings in your pocket, 40 shillings is like $50. If you don't have at least $1 in your pocket, you're actually committing a crime by walking around without any money. If you're walking around town beyond 10 p.m. at night, that's loitering without the authority of the city clerk. All these colonial laws still continue to apply in Kenya. And part of the laws that we have that are, in my opinion, very colonial and still apply in Kenya is section 162 to 165 of the Penal Code, which criminalized homosexual conduct with 14 years in imprisonment. And it speaks about whether these acts are committed in private or public. There's no regard to where the acts are committed. And the canon knowledge against the order of nature has never been defined by any Kenyan court. There's never been any successful prosecution based on these sections of the law in Kenya. But to draw jurisprudence from the Commonwealth so that we can find an interpretation of what this canon knowledge against the order of nature. In the Zimbabwean case of Banana versus Republic, the former Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, when he was charged with sodomy, and he appealed and said that sodomy laws go against privacy rights. The court said, yeah, sodomy laws is interpreted as penetration per annum, and the court also said that there was no breach of privacy rights because morality had to be upheld by them. That was in 2003, I think. But what these sodomy laws do, and I know that most of you here are aware of it, the effects of sodomy laws, so I don't have to rehash it, but the very reduction of gay men into one-dimensional creatures, the very exclusion of persons who have a different sexual orientation from the universe of equals, the punishment that attaches to it, the criminalization that makes people walk around with a stain on their dignity, feeling like criminals everywhere, the exclusion that it informs in public policy, because when you go to church, the structures that we have in Kenya are religion, education, and industry. So when you grow up as a child, let's say that you're queer, you're introduced to church or to the mosque. The theology that is taught there excludes you and shames you and teaches you that you do not belong to the universe of equals because you're a sinner, because you're evil, because you're cursed. We have people who still run ex-gay programs just the same as you do in the US from a religious front. You have people who have made sure that our education system in Kenya, which we are taxed and we pay for at the primary school level as early as class 5, we teach children in social education and ethics, which is a compulsory subject, that homosexuality is a social deviance on the same footing as drug addiction, on the same footing as criminality. Pay taxes to have the Christian religious education, which is taught and funded by public taxes in primary school and high school, where I remember last year, 2012, last year, they had a question in the Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education in the CRE paper 2, asking students in high school to give 10 reasons why Christians in Kenya are united against homosexuals. So, in essence, it's not just the law, but this law is informing a lot of public policy decisions and attitudes, shaping students from an early mind to hate homosexuals, to unite in a theology that teaches hatred of persons because of their sexual orientation. And you might remember from your accounts in 2010 what happened in Mtwapa, Mombasa, where 4 gay men were dosed with kerosene by a very irate mob which wanted to set them ablaze on allegations they were about to engage in a gay wedding. This was instigated by religious leaders who to the present walk scot-free and have never ever been investigated despite efforts to push for the investigation for such hate crimes. Because for such a long time, as someone who has a lived experience of being queer in Kenya, and growing up in the rural village, going to public schools which are funded by churches, you're taught every day that you don't belong, that you're shameful, that you're a stigma, that you are not part of the society, that something is wrong with you. And what that does to you, and especially from an early age, is that it destroys your dignity. It stains you with so many questions of your respectability, desirability, and your thriving in society as a human in the universe of equals. But let me move very quickly to give you the roadmap of where we are at and where we are heading towards decriminalizing homosexual sex in Kenya. The case of Kanani versus Botswana, the Republic of Botswana, about this man who was trying to challenge these sort of laws. It gives us a lot of direction in terms of what direction we need to be going, because the court said that they will not fly loath of public opinion and decriminalize homosexuality ahead of time in Botswana. And then the courts also said that there was no evidence to show that the LGBT community was a constitutive body that was in need of protection from the constitutional court. In essence, there's no documentation of all these violations. Where are they? And this is the same thing that the courts told us in 2010, when in Kenya, we had the case of Richard Mwasia versus the Attorney General. Richard Mwasia was this intersex person who was suing the Attorney General for failure of recognition as a person before the law, because he did not have any documentation from the government because of his analogous sex. And the 3-judge bench of the High Court said that there's no evidence that there's a body of intersex people. There's no evidence there's a body of sexual minorities in this country who are facing violations. So go back and come back when you have evidence that there's actually a body of people who are facing all these violations. So what we've been doing since then is in 2011, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, I was working at the Kenya Human Rights Commission then, we carried this countrywide research on the human rights conditions of LGBT persons in Kenya. And we came up with a report called The Outlawed Amongst Us. In 2012, the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, which is a quasi-judicial organ of the government, carried out a report on reproductive and sexual health rights in Kenya. And they documented very, very widespread discrimination in terms of access to health services by service providers against LGBT persons. There's this story of this man from Diani who went to be treated for anal warts. Diani is in south coast of Kenya. And when the young man went to the dispensary with anal warts, what the nurse did upon examination is that she went and called all the other patients who are queuing in line to be treated and the rest of our colleagues at the dispensary to come and see a homosexual, which was very stigmatizing for this young man. He fled and he didn't even receive treatment. The report says that people, gay people especially, barely seek health services when they are sick because of the fear of stigma and the fear of law enforcement. Criminal law requires doctors to report criminals who go to seek services to them. It's the same as if I go to a clinic with a gun wound, the doctor will require me to go and get a P3. The doctor will notify the local police. So they treat that as the same. If you go to a clinic with evidence that you are having homosexual sex, people fear that the doctor will call the police on them. For the last 1.5 years, we have been trying to get registered. The National Gay Lesbian Human Rights Commission has been trying to get registered with the National NGO Coordination Board. And they wrote us a letter saying why they were not registered. And part of the reasons are, one, gay and lesbian liaisons are criminalized. 2, sexual orientation is not mentioned in the Constitution. 3, in the opinion of the director of the board, the words gay and lesbian are undesirable and repugnant, and our work is inconsistent with the national interests of the country. And 4, gay marriages are not allowed in Kenya. No one was asking for marriage. So what we've done is that we've framed all these constitutional questions to the court in our petition. And we are asking the court to guide us and tell us whether that Article 36 of the Constitution that says that every person has a right to join and form an association of any kind, whether this article excludes gay and lesbian associations. And we're asking the court to be guided by the constitutional value of equality and inclusiveness. The roadmap continues, and our roadmap is informed by incremental litigation. What we don't want to do is to directly target sodomy laws and seek to strike them down because of the existing political nuances and religious attitudes among the Kenyan public. We want to have a step at a time, incremental approach, 1 foot on the door, keep the door open, get the cases coming in. Use the judiciary as a tool or as an institution to pile all this evidence that the judiciary wants. You know, let the judiciary absorb all this evidence of people complaining of human rights violation so that incrementally we get critical evidence that we can use in 2 years' time to now say we want to revise this penal code to bring it on board with the new constitution. But the last 2 things I'll say is, in terms of litigation is this. Next year, we are taking a case to the industry court. There's this young man who was dismissed from his place of work when he was outed by his colleagues to his employer. And he was given a dismissal letter that gave the ground of his sexual orientation as a reason why he was being dismissed. So we'll be asking the industrial court, which is part of the High Court and which has mandates to interpret the Constitution also, to tell us whether the Employment Act in Section 5 and the Constitution of Kenya in Article 27 allows discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And then the icing on the cake, we have this litigation collective with more than 8 civil society organizations drawn from, some are actually not civil society because they are government agencies like the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights, And we also have constitutional jurists who wrote the Constitution of Kenya because it was written by a committee of experts, also in our litigation collective. What we're intending to do is this. Together with women's rights organizations, sex worker organizations, LGBT organizations, and children's rights organizations, we want to ask the courts to revise our penal code, especially the sections that deal with crimes against morality, with the intention of decriminalizing consensual adult sex in private. We are drawing a lot of examples and analogies from the Indian litigation collective, and the New Delhi case is really, really informing the strategies that we're engaging in. And part of these informing structures that are supporting the litigation, because we understand we can go to court very easily as a commission, win cases, get right, but we still have cases, as we see in South Africa, where as much as it is legal to marry between the same sex, and gay sex is not illegal, we have lesbian rapes going on very much, we have gay bashing going on very much. So we have been crafting ways of winning our cases also, not just in court, but also in the court of public opinion. So we engage in civic action, in demonstrations and organizing that is not necessarily around soggy issues. Civic action around governance, civic action around corruption. For example, we had this Occupy Parliament where we were protesting against the MPs' attempts, members of parliament attempts to increase their salaries as a first order of business upon being voted in without even doing any work. They actually did. And so we demonstrated, and the third demonstration, together with other social justice actors, we took pigs, live swines, into parliament, and we threw them there, and we told them, those are your brothers and sisters, you're as greedy as they are. There's no way you can be human and Kenyan in our economic conditions and want to be paid higher than the US senators and members of Congress. They actually won. They still pay themselves that high. Yeah. So and they got us arrested, and we have been going in and out of court, and my time is running out. But we also, this is also being informed by the South African experiences, where during the ANC apartheid struggle, the LGBT constituency was very active in the apartheid struggle. So after the independence, it was easily negotiable to include sexual orientation as a protected ground in the constitution. We want to keep these social justice actions going on, to integrate our work, so that working on LGBT issues is no longer a silo, which is isolated and excluded there, as has been for a long time. There are media campaigns going on and public dialogue, which we started last year, at the Gay and Lesbian Awards in City Hall, and this year at the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, marching from Uhuru Park to the Attorney General to petition him to decriminalize homosexuality, even though the police came and contained us and told us that they will arrest us for promoting the commission of a felony. 1 minute?
Sure.
Engaging religion. Religion is a huge factor from where I come from. And so we have initiatives like the United Coalition of Affirming Africans, bringing together clergy from different denominations to come up with, to embrace theology that embraces sexual diversity. The global politics that you guys are helping shape in terms of equality, like marriage equality, or condemning what's going on in Russia and Uganda. This network of sharing of information and stouting and strengthening equality efforts across the globe are also really very much helping the psyche of a lot of activists, and helping get jurisprudence and theories and arguments to help in the work that we are doing. Thank you for the opportunity and for listening.
Well, no, thank you very much.